when we talk about a fire, we talk about a really bad fire as being a good job. Whereas normally a person would say, when you're talking about good, it's, you know, it's a fire, it's bad. But, you know, we say, oh, wow, it's a good job. You know, and you get pumped up because it's going to be a good fire. You know, it's going to be a challenge. Right, exactly. But there was no, that atmosphere wasn't there that day. I worked in 4 out of the 5 boroughs over my career. The only borough I didn't work in was Staten Island. I started out in the Bronx in the late 60s, and then I worked in Queens, then I worked in Manhattan, then I went to Brooklyn, then I went back to Manhattan, then I went to Queens. So, as I changed ranks, I switched around. So. I'm retired now. I was diagnosed in 2007 with pulmonary fibrosis from my work at the Trade Center. I'm married, I have 2 sons, one a firefighter, one is a police officer. All 3 were working on September 11th. On September 11th, I was working in Glen Oaks, Queens, which is right on the Nassau border between Nassau County and Queens County. I had worked the night before and was scheduled to work that day. I was watching the news when they, you know, when it first broke in and announced the plane that hit the World Trade Center. I just assumed it was a Piper Cub, some small airplane, you know. I certainly didn't think it would be an airliner, you know. Once they said it was a passenger airliner, then I knew it wasn't an accident, you know, just pilot's not going to miss you know, seeing the World Trade Center. Once the first building collapsed, I knew that a lot of firefighters were going to be buried. There was no doubt in my mind that we had lost a lot of people that day. And I just wanted, you know, it was important that I be on the pile as quickly as possible. So I worked a total of about 8 years in Lower Manhattan. I was very familiar with the Trade Center. I was there almost on a daily basis when I worked. So I did know a lot of people, and also back in about 83 rather, I was an instructor at the Fire Academy, so I know a lot of some of the people that died were students of mine. Most of the companies in outlying areas were just held. So I was calling the dispatcher every couple of minutes trying to talk him into assigning me to the Trade Center. But finally he said he could get me in as far as like Long Island City where the cemeteries are. And when we arrived there, there was a convoy of about 20 heavy rescue vehicles from Suffolk County and from Nassau County. And they were preparing to go into Manhattan. So I called the dispatcher and told him that I would lead them in, you know. So that's how I got in the first day. So we got there, I would guess about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Coming over the Brooklyn Bridge, you couldn't see Lower Manhattan. You were riding from the light into darkness. You know, there was so much dust still in the air at that time. It was almost unbreathable. You know, we were using paper masks, but they clogged so fast. You had to keep taking them off, go get another one, you know. So, but I remember how dark it was. I was really surprised by how much dust was still in the air. It was very quiet. You would think there would have been a lot of noise with people, you know, giving orders and, you know, but it wasn't. I remember it being very quiet for some reason. But when we arrived, I arrived at Broadway, right by Pace University, and the fire department doctors, Dr. Kelly and Dr. Prezant, were setting up a triage area in that location. So they needed some lighting and whatnot. So We turned over one of the heavy rescues to set up lighting for the hospital, and then the rest of them reported it to the chief in charge on the Broadway side. And then it was, just a matter of get on the pile and dig. When I had spoken to Dr. Kelly and at that first encounter, I asked her what she needed, and her remark to me was, patience. Nobody's coming out. And when she said that, then I knew that it was, even worse than I had thought. I thought there would be some survivors, but there were very, very few. I had managed to contact my wife, who had spoken to both my sons. One son was at the Trade Center. He had just arrived when the second building collapsed. And my other son, a police officer, was working in Brooklyn. And they kept him in Brooklyn at the bridge, keeping traffic out and letting emergency vehicles in and whatnot. So we were assured that they were safe, at least. I knew my older son would be there because I had heard his company on the radio being assigned. He got lucky because his company was diverted while they were responding. The dispatchers asked him to stop at the fire academy where mass service unit was and pick up all the spare bottles that they had. And because of that delay, they weren't inside the building. They weren't in the buildings when they came down. So he was lucky. Actually, what we did was form lines. We had those 10-gallon buckets from Home Depot, the orange buckets, and the guy at the front of the line would fill it up with the debris, and the bucket would be passed like an old fire bucket brigade, and it got to the end, they just kept feeding buckets. One line putting empty buckets back up the hill, and one line going down the hill full buckets. This wasn't in the first couple of days. It was maybe in about 4 or 5 days. And I was really, really tired, and I was passing a bucket, and I was saying to myself as I passed the bucket, when I give it to him, I'm gonna get off the pile and go and rest, And as I turned, I'm handing the bucket to Boomer Esiason, who was a football player, had retired and is now a sportscaster. But he was on the pile. So now I couldn't go and rest. No way I was going to let Boomer see me leaving the pile, so I went back to work. Everybody you could think of, police, fire, EMS, construction workers, office workers from the area were on the pile digging. It was amazing, quite frankly, how organized they were, because there was so many different people. But it was working. It was, the system was working. I think it was only on Friday, really, before they actually got what you would say is control over the scene. From between Tuesday and Friday, anybody that wanted to be on the pile could be on the pile. They just came in and started digging. Friday, everything was cordoned off. There were entry points, and you had to show that you were, supposed to be there. No more volunteers from, just walking in. But before that, like I said, for the first 4 days, I would say from Tuesday to Thursday, anybody that wanted to be on the pile could be on a pile. There were guys from New Jersey and, people from every conceivable occupation. I remember Sigourney Weaver feeding people. I don't know the actor's name. He played Fred Savage's father in The Growing Years or something. He was down there constantly. Every time I was there, I saw him there. He was driving around in an all-terrain vehicle, giving guys coffee. So it was people from every walk of life. I believe we used the paper masks at least 2 weeks. I would say we were well into the second week before we got a respirator. And then the The respirator that they issued us wasn't the right one. The canisters weren't right or something. The filters weren't the proper filters, so they had to take those back and give you different respirators. But quite frankly, I guess by the third or fourth day, what they call the Trade Center cough had emerged, and it was pretty, I mean, the fire department issued every member a steroid inhaler because of the cough. You didn't even have to go and see a doctor. They just issued everybody an inhaler because they knew you were going to get the cough. If you didn't have it yet, you were going to get it. You know, so firefighters work on a principle of air quality. If I can see the air I'm breathing, I know it's not good for me. You know, so if you can see what you're breathing, you know it's not good for you. So we expected, you know, that there were going to be side effects. You know, I don't know that I thought mine was going to be as bad as it turned out to be, but I certainly knew the air I was breathing wasn't good. In the 3 months that I was there, we found very, very few victims. We found pieces, but not bodies. You know, I remember shoes. Kept finding shoes with feet in them. And you'd say, oh, well, there's a body here. And you would dig and dig and dig, and there would be nothing else. You know, just a shoe with a foot in it. You know, I couldn't understand why there wasn't the rest of the body. I mean, if the foot is here, there has to be something else, and you know, there wasn't. You would dig and dig, and you know, there wouldn't be anything. I can remember one day, one of my men found, we were digging. After 2 days or so, you started going by smell from decomposition. You know, so you get in an area and you could smell it, and that's where he would start digging, and he uncovered a spinal column, intact, full spinal column, but that's all. Nothing else. Again, everybody ran to that spot and started digging. You know, we're going to find some remains, but you didn't. You know, it was just pieces. They were just thrown all over. Whenever you found something, you had to call. They had, each side of the trade center had a chief in charge, a command post, and you would call back to your command post. They would send out somebody with the GPS unit so they could mark the location of the remains for a record, to make sure that a record, you know. Then the remains would be bagged and carried off site to the morgue. To me, it was like a reward. You know, you were doing something right. You found somebody's remains, whatever they were, and you were going to return those remains to their family. So you did get that sense of, you know, accomplishment. It's just that you didn't get it that often. And you know, I think that was, for me, the most discouraging, was that we weren't finding bodies. You know, you bring out a whole body, it's an accomplishment. But, you know, I kind of feel like, when I think back, if I were to say anything was discouraging, that would be, you know, that would be what was most discouraging for me. I have a collection of little teddy bears. It's like every time you really got looking really whipped, some young girl would walk up and give you a teddy bear. Yeah, here's a teddy bear, you know. And it would perk you up and you go back to work. So I have about 8 teddy bears on over my computer at home. There was just so much to do, you really didn't have a lot of time to think about, you know, how bad it was. I mean, we knew, like I said from the beginning, that there were going to be a lot of firefighters die that day. Once that first building collapsed, there was no doubt about it. It goes back to training, you know, because of the professional, you were so busy doing your job, you really didn't have time to reflect. You know, it was only later that, you know, the thoughts, you know, kick in, and it's not hard. I don't talk about it a lot. I don't like, I wouldn't go to with the memorial that they're going to build at Ground Zero. I'll never see. I just can't go back there, and I prefer to remember the hole in the ground that I climbed out of on that last day, you know, as it was. I think the recovery was our main concern. You know, so I wanted to bring as many people home as I could. You know, I certainly didn't want to leave any of my brothers in that pile. You know, it's you wanted to get as many families something. I didn't go to funerals, though. I couldn't go to funerals. That's why I spent as much time on the pile and in the pit as I did. Psychologically, I probably would have broken down. I don't think I would have made it that way. For me, it seemed safer to be on a pile or in the pit digging than going to a funeral. I did attend a few, but not hardly as many as most other guys attended. I knew it wasn't going to work for me psychologically. Yeah. So I don't see any great change in the world since 9/11. I don't think we've learned any great insight. If you look around the world, the people in charge are still doing the same dumb things they were doing before 9/11. Nothing's really changed. You know, there's no major change that's going to prevent another 9/11. I think most of us just argue about when the next time we're going to get hit, not if. It would have been nice had on September 12th, all the world leaders got together and said, we can't have this anymore. You know, we have to get peace. We have to get along. Well, you know, it's a pipe dream. It wasn't going to happen. You know, would have been nice, but we all know it was a pipe dream. You know, we were always going to find an excuse to kill each other. You know, it seems that way to me. You know, I always laugh. I'm 66 years old, and in every decade of my life, this country's been at war with someone. You know, not saying it's our fault, you know, but a man will always find an excuse. You know, it's just to war. It's, I guess it's nature, but I don't know. You know, scary. I don't view the world as any more dangerous today than it was on September 10th. On September 10th, I was maybe a little more forgiving. You know, as I said, you know, I thought the world was just as dangerous then, you know, as it was on the 11th. But I guess after the 11th, I was, you know, okay, you know, that's one for you. You know, I'll get mine, you know, sooner or later. I always say what goes around comes around.